Um, but I've always had a really strong passion to change the world. I had a grandmother who mostly raised me and told me that the world is a horrible place when humans do bad things. She grew up in the early 20th century, right, where things were really bad in Europe. She was Hungarian. And she said, David, you have to make the world better and show humanity that they can do better and be the best they can be. And so I grew up with that. And so I set out to try and leave the world a better place. And I've spent every day of my life doing that. And so I got a PhD in molecular biology and genetics. And I had a passion for understanding why we get sick. And instead of becoming a physician, I became a scientist because I thought I could help billions of people rather than thousands. And that's what I've been doing. And I thought the best way to improve health was to understand why we get sick in the first place.
And so maybe turning to that science and some of your more recent work, and just for everyone watching and listening, how does the science around extending lifespans and reversing aging work in a really practical way? Now, in your book, there's some beautiful illustrations that you have in there. They use the analogy of a DVD being scratched. So maybe it'd be great if you can start there, recount the DVD analogy, and talk maybe about some of the work you've done with mice, with their optic nerves. It'd be great to just understand that science in a practical way, as you do so well.
Well, I'll try to be brief because it's 25 years of research. It begins with yeast research. I moved to MIT in 1995 to work with Professor Lenny Guarente, and it was a fantastic 4 years. We discovered why yeast cells get old and the genes that control that process, the sirtuins I mentioned, and that DNA breakage leads to problems in the cell, which we now believe is a major cause of aging in our bodies. If you want to just boil it down to what I think is really causing aging, it's a loss of information. I could write that down in a single equation if you wanted to. What it basically says is that in our cells, we have information and that we lose it over time, and cells and tissues and organs lose their ability to function, in essence, because those cells forget how to work. They lose their identity. And there are two ways that the cells encode their identity from birth or before that, from conception. One is in our DNA, which we hear a lot about, but the other type of information that we need just as much is what's called the epigenome, which are the control systems that tell which genes to come on in which cells at what time. And every cell has essentially the same DNA, of course, but what makes a brain cell different from a skin cell is the epigenome. Think of it as the reader of a DVD disc or the software in a computer. And I believe that aging is due to the corruption of that software. And we've worked out what causes that corruption, or in the case of the DVD or the disc, it scratches, so you cannot read the beautiful music anymore. And we understand the processes of all of that. And we can actually now drive aging in the forwards direction. In my lab, we've been making mice get 50% older, sometimes within a month, within 10 months. And they literally get older. We can now measure that by looking at chemicals that control the epigenome. One particular type is called DNA methylation. You can have a mouth swab, and I could tell you how old you are biologically. Now, that was all fine and good, that we could understand why we age and drive it forwards. But the question is, if you understand why something happens, if you can make it happen, can you take it away? And I studied and was fascinated with the work of a professor, Claude Shannon, at MIT in the 1940s. And he came up with mathematics that explained how to preserve information. And if there's noise that happens, you can actually get around that. And what he came up with was the idea of having what we now know as just having a backup copy. And the question was, in our work, is there a backup copy of youth? Is it possible to polish off those scratches on the disk or reboot the software of a computer? And we didn't know until December. Well, the world didn't know. We knew a few years before that, whether it was possible to safely do that. And of course, safety is an issue, because if you erase the cell's identity, it'll become a tumor or just die. And we didn't know if you could wind the clock back to say age 20 instead of 70, and not cause cancer or kill the tissue. And what we've discovered, to our delight, is that cells have a mechanism to actually polish those scratches, reset the cell, and be young again without causing any issues of health. And we published this in the journal Nature in December. It was on the cover. The title on the cover was Turning Back Time. And we used this gene therapy technology to reverse aging in old mice. We put it into the old mice in their whole body. It was safe. And we chose the eye as a place to start. And we could make old eyes young again. We do this routinely in my lab now. Those eyes are blind in the old mice, and then the mice can see perfectly again after 4 weeks of treatment. And we think that this can be used not just for treating aging in humans, but also restoring eyesight caused by genetic diseases and even glaucoma, pressure in the eye, a leading cause of blindness. And so I've started a number of companies, one of which is doing clinical trials or heading towards clinical trials in 2023. We're about to start primate studies after a lot of mouse safety studies. But long story short, we've shown that there is a backup copy of youth in mammals. We know it's true for human cells. We can reprogram human skin and muscle and even brain cells. And so we're at a point now where the question is, how soon can we get this to the public as a medicine? And we're going as fast as we can and as safely as possible as well.